As me na Nambia. I want me up for where as long as I want, I need to hear next week.
Good morning, dear senior career researchers. You are welcome to the third session of our series. Today we'll be looking at a very important and very interesting as well aspect of manuscript writing, which is ethical considerations in publishing. We look forward to an exciting interaction with Professor Monerenike Olayan, who will be taking us through this discussion. Thank you very much, Ma. Over to you, Ma.
Thank you very much, Kudus. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining for another session. And once again, this is for senior career researchers, so we're not teaching, it's just facilitating. We look forward to
perhaps that they watch Channel 5.
Yes, very much. Exactly. Apologies, that's my grandson. So it's once again it's for senior career researchers, which means we're not teaching you. We're hoping this is an engagement where we also learn from you, and together we can improve our training of early career researchers and mentees. We're looking at ethical consideration in publishing. What is it that we need to do as trainers, as well as working with our mentee supervisors to ensure that whatever it is you're putting out there is ethically compliant. So in the next 30 minutes or so, I hope to address issues around what ethical dilemmas are when we're talking about preparing manuscripts, understanding journal data policies and reproducibility standards, and also raising the elephants in the room, ethical considerations for AI. I would also be plugging in something around subjectivity and objectivity, which is something of interest I teach at the Oxford University. And I think it matters when we're thinking about ethical issues and recognizing how subjectivity may otherwise undermine, but it can undermine what we're doing, but also recognizing that subjectivity cannot in itself completely be eliminated, but it can be managed. So let's look at issues around ethical dilemmas in manuscript writing. One of the big challenges that we have to deal with is authorship ethics. Who is supposed to be an author? There is a standard criteria in the industry known as the ICMJE. In that criteria, we need to meet 5 criteria. If you do not meet the 5 criteria, you're not truly an author. You can't be acknowledged. One especially has to do with intellectual property input, data collection, writing, editing, and agreeing on the entire product that is known as the manuscript. It matters to ensure that authors are truly authors. And that's where we talk about gift authorship and ghost authorship. When we talk about gift authorship, these are people who otherwise are not authors, but you you give them as a gift, come and be authors. Those kind of authors as it's going on. Morenica, what are you writing today? Okay, put my name. When it's time to pay for the APC, I will take complete responsibility. You write and you put my name. These are authors that don't know what it is. They don't know how you collect the data. They don't know what you sorted. They're just amassing numbers for their promotion or for whatever reasons. The danger about this, especially when we start going to the world of AI, even before AI, we do have issues around data falsification. in 3 ways: falsification, fabrication, as well as plagiarism. Why many manuscripts have moved towards multiple authorship is that with multiple authorship, you reduce the risk of this kind of fabrication. Manuscripts that don't exist, but you sit at your table and then you cook it up and you cook data. Those cooking up becomes even easier with AI. Therefore, when the multiple authors that gather and say they wrote a manuscript but did not write, you know, you send a false projection to the world that even within yourself as a team, you have guarded and protected the integrity of what you've written. As a team, you have brought multiple intelligence into writing. That's the first thing you're saying. So multiple perspective, everything I know I have brought to enlighten and share knowledge that will be useful in addressing the gap. That's the first thing you're telling us. Whereas when you did give culture sheet, that's not true. It is one person that actually did the whole work. And it's the one person's intelligence that we're using, whether it's fabrication or not. And yet we put all the gifts. So you're projecting something wrong to the world when you say you are co-authors. And of course, when liability comes, you should be ready for such liability as a collective. The second, of course, is the post-author. Somebody writes, maybe you paid them, the kind of things that are happening in our universities with thesis, the PhD guys, they want income, so they write the thesis of undergraduates for them, but their names are not there. So you pay them. So these are ghost authors or people that truly merit being authors, but you eliminate them and don't include them as authors. These are some of the concerns about authorship. There are criteria for authorship. Anybody that should be an author should be listed. And this is especially of interest when we're talking about in collaborative research, where you're seeing a lot of foreigners, international collaborators collecting data, writing and publishing maybe about 20, 30 manuscripts from your data, then giving you, one or two authorship. These are ghost authorships. These are things we must deal with. Deal with very early with our mentees and let them know what this ought to be. Let them learn right. Of concern also is the issue of plagiarism and redundancy. I'm sure many would know about plagiarism, but there's a place for self-plagiarism where you are quoting yourself and almost copying the things you're doing in another manuscript. Even if you're the author of the first manuscript, please know that you can't copy yourself into another word for word. It's very wrong to do duplicate submissions. You submit one at a time. If there's a problem with one, you withdraw officially before you resubmit. You don't submit any manuscript into two places at the same time. It's one after the other. And of course, once again, is the issue of originality. You must be addressing a gap. You must be addressing a gap. You can't be copying or taking somebody else's work. And it happens a lot in our time. Or we need to teach and train them. One of the things I suggest is that when you have an early career researcher with you, the first 1-2 weeks, teach them basics, have lectures with them, and there's a minimum standard of operating with you. Conflict of interest also matters, where whatever it is that we acquire for the use of the research must be declared in writing in the manuscripts. If you're funded by a pharmaceutical organization and you're doing the work related to it, please write it. A conflict of interest has to be put. It becomes damaging when it is discovered. So when you put it up front, it's no problem. There's no issue about it. But when it's discovered, it then becomes a major issue. Please also note that for human and animal research, ethics approval is a necessity. When you're dealing with humans or animals, whether it's dead or alive, go and collect ethics approval. You collect ethics approval ahead of the study. You don't submit for ethics approval and then go to the field and be collecting data. What happens in this kind of situation is that when the ethics committee asks for revision, because you've gone ahead to collect data, you won't be able to revise. You will stick with what is wrong, whereas the ethics committee is revising. If the ethics committee is slow, put in institutional systems to ensure that they fast track the piece of, they do things rightly. The national expects that all handling of ethics application should be completed within a 90-day cycle from revision to back and forth, 90 days. That is what is expected. Highlight it and make sure that they do the things they should do, but don't go to the field without ethics approval. The beauty about ethics approval, and you'll see as we go forward, is that there's an independent set of persons that is looking through an independent eye on what you're doing. And therefore, they're not conflicted. They can see what you otherwise would not see, which is normal for any human beings. If you're doing a study, you're blinded by the interest in that study. The ethics committee will be able to look at it independently and provide support. And also, many times when you're doing studies with humans, you're expected to have informed consent, and it's a process of getting approval and disclosure to the participants. Please encourage your mentees and supervisors that they don't collect an approval for informed consent, and then when they reach the field, they don't do it. They get the approval, they write all the beautiful things, but they don't do it. One of the things I see so many times is when people come on to, platforms, WhatsApp platforms, and they share online survey tools. They want to collect data. There's nothing on ethics in that online data. You must include that information. You must include that you collected ethics approval. You must seek consent, whether you are collecting data online or you are collecting it face to face. You must seek consent. Okay, it is an ethical requirement in any research. Of course, if you're going to Q1, Q2 journal, they will request for it. If you're going to just any journal, it doesn't matter. It's the money that they are looking for. And like we've talked about data manipulation and images that we use, please, we cannot falsify, fabricate. We must strict. The falsification and fabrication is so much and so rampant within us. You find that because many undergraduate and postgraduate students that have to do research, because of time constraint, they start late. They will finish late. They now start to falsify. We need to deal with this. We need to sit on top of them and supervise. So tell them to bring the data, inspect it. Occasionally keep looking, the informed consent process. Look for the signed document. You must supervise. You must check these things. Otherwise, the pressure of time makes them do falsifications, including data manipulation. With all these AIs, they will tell you they did something under the microscope, show us an image, but it's not true. They took an image, an old image, and manipulated it and represented it. So these are issues, and I'm sure there are more, but the few that I want to talk about. Okay. So the second also has to do with journal policies and reproducibility standards. Okay. Please note that more and more, whatever we do when we generate data, be it qualitative or quantitative, we have to share openly. The open sharing policy is becoming more and more and more needed, especially with the AIs and the falsification of manuscripts that don't exist and people generate. Please enable and ensure that your supervisors and mentees prepare their data in a way that they would share it. The raw data has to be cleaned appropriately and shared so that when people are also looking at the manuscript, if they need the data, they can go and check and validate the findings. We truly may make honest mistakes. So when they look at it, then there's more and more meta-analysis and systematic reviews. People need to go to those data and reanalyze, okay, to be able to generate their own manuscripts. Transparency and statistical reporting is very important, especially you might find out that when you're doing this analysis, there might be need, if you want to truly report all the data, to put a lot of them in the appendix as supplementary data and sets. Please follow guidance of reporting whatever it is. Keep telling people when they're reporting statistics, they will say, P, this is statistically significant. P is above 0.05. It's not statistically significant. You report what you found. Transparency says everything you report things exactly as it is. Don't approximate. Approximation is not the way to go. You don't approximate. Say it exactly as it is. It is 0.52. It is you got 15.37%. You must report it as it is. Don't approximate. When I am using that information, I can choose to approximate, but you, when you're reporting, it must be exactly as what you get. If you have to register your reports, please register them. For example, those that do scoping reviews, systematic reviews, there are places where you have to register. Clinical trials, there are places where you have to do all this registration for transparencies, because people, they would go to the the protocols to ensure that what you said you were going to do in the protocol is what you are doing. Preprints are becoming more and more important. It became really important during the pandemic process, so that our preprint actions can be taken even where peer review is going on. I'm not I'm not a fan of preprints, but it's all also about getting the information credibly there early for use, especially during the pandemic when urgency is needed for actions. We have talked about reporting guidelines at the last lecture. Please promote the use of reporting guidelines by your mentees and mentors. It allows for objectivity, it allows for comparison. There's the standards of writing, and then it's easy for us to do things across board. And of course, peer review integrity. Don't go to predator journals. I don't think we can say it enough. Don't find your way to predator journals. Don't encourage your mentees. Dissuade them, teach them, let them know there is no place for you to go to predator journals in the name of rushing to get your manuscript published so that you can get the number of papers for your promotion. Don't dare, don't go there. It's damaging, it's destructive. Because in those places, peer review do not happen, or they are poorly done. It's either it doesn't happen or it's poorly done. And when peer reviews are not done adequately, then there's false information in the name of science production in publication space. And then in terms of AI, this is a big deal. And the publishing world is still grappling how to manage this effectively. It's the falsifications that come with this. 3 days ago, I had to handle 2 manuscripts back to back. And because of that, I had to write a manuscript. I had to write a manuscript of the challenge as a reviewer. The first was somebody that wrote an editorial. It was black and white, cut and paste AI. If you're in the industry with time, you can smell AI produced manuscript. It was black and white AI. Not only was it just black and white AI, there was nothing intellectually challenging in the write-up. And then I wrote back and said, of course, I can't write that, oh, this is AI, even if you know it. That's the headache. Because if they say it's not AI, how are you going to defend yourself? Because there's no objective way to say it's AI. You just know by experience. And then one of the things was there was absolutely no reference. He read nice, but there was no nothing intellectual for an editorial for that matter. There was no depth to it. And then replied and said, look, and then they edited with 2-3 lines, still no reference. Then I wrote back, no, look at this sentence, it needs a reference. So I sent to them about 4 sentences that need a reference. Then I wrote back, those 4, they didn't look at the whole manuscript, it's only those 4 that they put references. There still was. Had to write to the journal and say, I can't handle this. I just can't handle this. Please change the editor, because I don't want my name to be associated with this before. And that same day, the next thing, I had another agreed to review. And lo and behold, I opened the manuscript. Introduction alone, there was 99 references. Or introduction was 11 paragraphs, 99 references. And out of these 11 paragraphs, there were one or two that was just one sentence as a paragraph. And you know what those AI does when they do those in those paragraphs, there'll be 3, 4 sentences. They ought to be referenced. All the references will be put in a bracket at the end, instead of referencing each statement, black and white. This is it. And I just stood there. How as a peer reviewer, it's not just that you read, you need to validate each of those references. Is this reference appropriate for each of those statements? So I said at introduction, I will now stay here validating 99 references. I've not gone to methodology, I've not gone to discussion. Of course, that was the place I ended. How are you? What kind of wahala is this as a peer reviewer with this AI? AI is chunking out manuscripts. You need to train your mentees about what it means. AI has its place, but it cannot create manuscripts. It can help you to improve the flow. It can help you to generate thoughts. Like what do I need to deal with this? But it cannot create manuscripts. You have to teach people to walk. You walk, and then the AI tools that you have refine. That's what it's supposed to be. Like I say, it's like the calculator. You must know the form. You must know what you want to do before you press the calculator. The calculator does not generate the formula for you. You know what you want to do. You know where you want to go. And that's the problem when you are doing statistics. If you do not know what you want from the statistics, you go and press button. It will bring out jargon and it will look as if it is okay. It is an expert's eye that will tell you this is trash. But if you know what you want to do and you work with the calculator, including your statistical analysis, it comes out brilliantly well. Because what that jargon it brings for you, you will edit it and only take those things that matter. But when you don't know it, you will now put everything there plus the things that are not relevant, that doesn't make sense. So AI tools complement. They are not alternatives to intelligence and manuscript writing. We must help them know. And then it comes also with its challenges. It's an algorithm-based model. So it becomes biased. If you're using that AI to do some things for some time, if you use it to generate manuscripts, you're going to only generate based on the knowledge you have put into it, kind of like its back house. That's the problem. It's also very important to know that AI cannot be written as an author, but even then, if you're using it, if you are invited as a peer reviewer, you can't use AI to do your peer review. Because the paper that was submitted to the journal was submitted with under the confidentiality. So when you put it into the AI, what happens that AI becomes available for that algorithm and it becomes accessible in that space. That's breaching the confidentiality clause. So you can't, okay? And then when I think that also comes with what I'm talking about peer review and editorial and processing. It shouldn't also be used to suggest reviewers because it generates false things. The AI hallucinates. They can hallucinate. AI tools can hallucinate. And in that hallucination, they'll just generate names that don't exist, including references that doesn't exist. Very recently, I was looking for a reference for a manuscript, and I was so happy for my manuscript, a statement I made, I needed to defend. I was so happy when I finally found something. And I got this article, I went to the reference, I searched for 2 days. It doesn't exist. That reference doesn't exist. So this guy, whoever it was, he felt like a guy. I'm sorry, I don't know who the sex of the person, meant this individual wrote a manuscript, including false referencing. And that's hallucination. These tools can hallucinate. You must be original and only use those tools to support. And when you truly use them to do things like analysis, then it must be declared. I want to raise issues. Many of us, when we do this ethics, we say we. we adhere to the Declaration of Helsinki. It's so common. And these are the things that they raise in their revision. All those guidelines they revise themselves over years. Nigeria has um, its own guideline, garden research. Very comprehensive, one of the best in the world. And it's best because at the time it was developed, it pulled all the guidelines there was to develop it, and then it contextualized it to make it very, very community relevant. So it's known and acknowledged to be one of the best ethics guidelines in the world. Um, but the Declaration of Helsinki revised these issues in 2024, and there were issues that changed, and I felt it's important that we know what is very current, and we also share this knowledge um, with our career researchers. The first is the terminology. Many of us know this issue. This subject thing is very American. They talk about research participants as subjects. In the Nigerian code, it is participants. We do not refer to study participants as subjects. And now the Declaration of Helsinki has shown throughout its documents that it is supposed to. They use participants, they don't use subjects. They also ensure gender neutral languages. Uh, they encourage the adoption of gender neutral languages. So when you're writing your manuscripts, avoid the things that will say he or she, policeman, use police officer, mankind, use global. Anything that has this gender terminology as much as possible, find the way to use something that is neutral. Chairperson, chair rather than chairman. Okay. Um, it's also talking about inclusive application, where the declaration addresses all individual teams and organizations involved in research, not just physicians. The Declaration of Helsinki was written by the World Medical Assembly, so it was very biased in its language to using physicians. But now it acknowledges that it's not just physicians that are involved in research, and so it is inclusive. It recognizes that there are a whole range of people that needs to be respected and uh, um, referred to in the research, and it also acknowledges the interdisciplinary or more so transdisciplinary nature of modern research. And so its language is so that it reflects that also. It also encourages participants' engagement, what we call community engagement, which means that before you even conceptualize, work with the community that is going to use your product so that at the end of the day, your finding becomes relevant for them and they can take it and run with it. One of the most brilliant people I keep celebrating is Professor Asuzu, that even his students, when they design and implement research, they disseminate the research to those people. We find it easy to go to people to collect data, but we find it difficult to go to them to tell them the information of the study. I mean, it's exploitation in its own way. So work with the communities, work with the group of people you need to generate information from. Let them bring the intelligence. There is native intelligence that matters. And then once you design your study in a way that is sensitive to the needs of the people, you disseminate after and they will use it. They will use it. Your research is not so that you go and publish and go to America and present at the conference. It's for people to use those findings. So it's important for them to be engaged. Otherwise, what you see is that there are million and one research sitting on the shelf. It's just a waste of resources, a waste of human people's time. We do research 1,000, 2,000, and it's only one that ends up being useful. We improve the usefulness through this participant engagement. And more journals are starting to request the evidence. You won't submit to BMG and they will ask you the evidence of engagement. It doesn't preclude you from publishing, but they're asking for it. Researchers are also now called upon to be careful, consider benefit, risk, and burdens of research are distributed equitably and justly at a global scale. Your team, and your writing team must reflect, where it is from. I recently presented at a conference and I showed two papers. These are papers that showed clearly that the study was done in Indonesia and Nigeria. They recruited 2,000 plus people in each of those spaces, followed them up for 24 months. The authors included nobody from Nigeria, just three people, nobody from Nigeria, nobody from Indonesia. This is injustice because The investment is somewhere else, and somebody else is reaping the benefit of this piece of work, including the grants and all that. So there's a lot more around distributive justice. You do research where it is most beneficial. So you don't use me and somebody else is benefiting from it. And the example I give is like contraceptives. I go and study contraceptives somewhere like Ajegula in Lagos because it's easy to recruit the participants, but the people that are going to use it are the ones in Victoria Island. So there's a lot more interest in that distributive justice and global justice so that people don't come from global north, export global south, and then take away. But I'm highlighting this because you, as a mentor and a supervisor, must oversee this process for your participants who are very much getting interested in grant writing and collaborative work. They ought to know these things. I'll say one particular thing that also really of concern to me when we do this, or two. One, you open up the space for your mentee and supervisor so that they go abroad and do their studies. But when they travel with specimens, they travel with data, you know,
Now, Google
they travel with specimens, they travel with data. Sorry, I'm muting people making noise. And there's no material transfer or data transfer agreements. They go and they leave them there. There's no data transfer agreement. Do you know the kind of injustice you're doing to the country by collecting those materials without officially signing material transfer agreement before you take those specimens? Nigeria has a material transfer agreement, a national material transfer agreement. You must sign so that there is accountability for the use of those materials wherever it is gone, and it is appropriately attributed for any research, intellectual property, or anything that comes out from the use of that material. Otherwise, we're just harvesting for them. That is one. The second is that even these materials that we're taking abroad, can we not negotiate to have them bring those instruments that they are using for those studies there and set it up here for the study? So that even after they have analyzed for the studies, other people can use it. And I celebrate Zimbabwe for that. They don't look any research, bring it, come and set up the instruments. If we don't have it, set it up here. We're not sending the materials. And I think also South Africa does that beautifully. We must be gatekeepers and promote this global justice and continue to discourage this apathy or skewness in terms of competency. Support your mentees in a way that they bring back expertise with the money, with the technology, with intellectual transfers, and institute competency within the local environment. Another thing of importance for the Declaration of Helsinki is the issue of vulnerability and inclusivity. We do recognize vulnerability is context specific. Nigeria, being a low middle income country itself, is also vulnerable. The declaration promotes fair and responsible inclusion of vulnerable populations. Do not include them if they are not needed. Do not use people. Do not skew and go and collect data amongst the low people. They don't go to GRA because the fence is high, and then you exclude them. Must be balanced with benefit. And one of the things that the declaration is also acknowledging is that you don't exclude people just for exclusion's sake. For example, I want to do contraceptive study because I don't want to be going for parental consent. I say I recruit people from 18 years and above. Whereas in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria, children 9 years old are already married. 9 years old, by the time they have kids. So why are you doing contraceptive studies in northern Nigeria and only recruiting from 18 and above? Because you want to avoid parental consenting. You don't want to go through the difficulty. That's not a reason. It's not justifiable. So when you are talking about inclusion and exclusion, there must be a just reason for including and excluding anybody. You can't say just exclude pregnant people because they are pregnant people. So what? And they're going to use the medication at the end of the outcome of the study. So anybody that's going to use the outcome of the study must be included in that study, but do not unnecessarily skew um, uh, the burden of a research to vulnerable populations. You must protect them. Okay, including getting consent. The consent is not just getting them to sign, they must understand what they're going into and agree to invest the time and resources into that research. It's also about data banking. More and more, there's a lot of banking of everything, banking of the eyes, banking of data banking. And the headache with this banking, or not the headache, is the secondary use of these banks. You find out that for years after, people are still using whatever it is that you bank, and people sign away. When we don't do that signing properly, they just sign away the use. What Declaration of Helsinki is saying now is that consenting for unforeseen secondary research is impracticable, and that's one of the beauties of the Nigerian Health Research Code. Ahead of this, you don't sign and say, this research, this my materials I'm giving you for use forever and ever. No, you must anticipate what you want to use it for in the next 10 years, and then they sign for it. It is, you don't give blanket informed consent for future use of any data forever and ever. You must sign for what it is specifically you want to use. That is what the Declaration of Helsinki is saying. And our own code has said it before. There's just signing to this declaration of you know, Taipei, which is about data banking and health databases also. Around the infinite use, once again, there cannot be infinite use of data. There's always the place in public health emergency, research on public health emergency, as well as being, incorporated, because during public health emergencies, there's need for research. For example, we never knew anything about COVID-19. It was a new disease. So as you're doing clinical care, data must also be generated to understand COVID-19, not just the biology, the social sciences, the arts, the entire ramification of what COVID-19 is. So public health emergencies and research happens hand in hand. But while the emergency might be urgent, research itself is not an emergency in itself. You want to fast track things. So what this is saying is that even though it is recognized, please note that every single standard that needs to be maintained about research must be maintained, even though it's a public health emergency. And even though there are unproven interventions that can be used, for example, during COVID-19, we know that the vaccines that were given, they hadn't been fully established as efficacious. The platform itself was an experimental ground to establish the efficacy. But during emergencies like that, when people are losing lives, there's a place for not fully proven interventions to be used. What the intervention is not, and what the declaration is saying, that even when that is allowed, everything must be put in place to ensure ethical protection and rigorous data generation, such that although the platform is being used as an experiment, it should never be taken as the conclusion. You still must use that system to generate the the information needed for you to get through full approval. And please know that your research must also protect the environment. The waste from research must be properly dumped, um, and everything must be done rigorously to protect the environment in a sustainable fashion. Once again, it re-emphasizes that ethics committees and getting independent ethics review is very important. It once again re-emphasizes that, okay? And that whatever resources is needed to strengthen the independence of the Research Ethics Committee must be invested in strengthening the committee. And finally, participants' preferences. Please note, when you are recruiting participants for your study, whatever it is, recruit them in the language they are comfortable with, consent them in the language they're comfortable with, and generate your data in the language they are comfortable with. Collect permission appropriately from whoever should be collect permission from. Whoever is a legal authorized representative collects permission if for children. I think these are issues just to note that you as supervisors need to support once again the issues I've said. Um, support your mentees and supervisors to understand the authorship criteria, read and understand the ICMJE standards, and ensure that they do not go the route of course guests that give authorship. They should be able to handle authorship dispute professionally. Ideally, the authorship issue should be defined at the beginning of the study, not when time, at the end of it, at the very beginning, and promote avoidance of plagiarism, fabrication, falsification, prevent double submission, and promote intellectual original contributions, encourage full disclosure, promote community engagement and participants' inclusion and justice, ensure that all protocols never start before research ethics approval, and support them to do the informed consent processes appropriately and put in place measures to protect vulnerable groups. You, as a researcher, must be liable to do this. Protect vulnerable groups, protect them from exploitation, from your own research also, and make sure that they comply to journal policies, including data availability. Let them, as they're preparing their manuscript, they prepare the data and put it online. There are platforms for putting your data online. Once again, it's both quantitative and quantitative. Qualitative and quantitative. Fixed Square, there are quite a number of them that are free. Just put it. In fact, you can publish your data, you can publish a manuscript around your data availability, and encourage the use of reporting guidelines. Do not just develop manuscripts because from the top of your head. Follow the guidelines, and then it becomes a second nature. Train your mentees and your supervisors on AI use and ethical use. But most importantly, you lead by example. You lead by example. You lead by example. Okay, and as much as not as much as possible, as much as it should be, reinforce rigorous study design, avoid research waste, and promote environmental safety. Before I close, I want to plug in something about subjectivity and objectivity very briefly. I teach this in my course at Oxford, and it's to note that even when with research, there are so if we are not aware about the risk of subjectivity in the interpretation of our results and our finding and the way we even design studies, we would not be able to manage it and we'll continue to do that. Okay. So when we're talking about objectivity and subjectivity, they seem to be contrast concepts. Okay, they seem to be opposite. And it's informed by how we perceive, interpret, or analyze information or events and situation. In practice, actually, the distinction is not clear cut, and it's a spectrum of a shade between the two extremes. So, what is objectivity? Objectivity refers to our approach in which we are free from personal bias, emotions, and individual opinions. We're able to look at issues clearly for what it is and rationally make interpretations of those events without it being adulterated by our personal feelings and our emotions in our background and our context. That's what objectivity is. Subjectivity, on the other hand, says that whatever we're dealing with is beclouded by experience, emotions, opinions, and perspectives. Okay. And this also makes us acknowledge that different persons might interpret the same things in different ways because our backgrounds are unique and we bring out different biases. Our biases informed by experience, our living, our emotions, our opinion, our culture, our religion. If you are not aware of this, you won't listen to others. That is why the teamwork also matters, because when you are seeing things from your own perspective as subjective, somebody else is bringing a perspective. And when everybody is bringing their perspective, as a team, you find a balance, which is likely more on the spectrum of objectivity rather than skewing to the spectrum of subjectivity. So, what are the key things? The subjectivity is inherent in research because it's human beings doing this, it's not machines. If it's a machine, of course, they take away the biases. But it is, and we have to be conscious of it to be able to step back from our biases and be a lot more objective. Once again, teamwork. enables that process. When it's a single author manuscript, it becomes a problem because it's that person's perspective that you're going to be sharing, and that's not in itself valid all itself. But the more you are as a team, the more the different perspective shapes and tends to reduce the impact of subjectivity in interpretation. Not only its interpretation, from the design stage, subjectivity actually affects it. So when you're talking about ethical research, you must balance objectivity and subjectivity. And we must acknowledge those personal values and consciously deal with them and beliefs that can influence the entire life cycle. So what does this mean? It means that we as researchers should self-engage in those reflection and recognize that these things come, the personal values, our beliefs, affects our research work. And we need to step out from it so that we are a lot more objective. It doesn't mean everything, subjectivity does not have a space. For example, when you're doing something like the Delphi method, where nothing exists on that knowledge, if you're going to bring your subjective perspective, but acknowledging that when you bring it together and pull it together, you reach a balance in terms of decision making and moving things forward. And strategies need to be adopted to address subjectivity, minimize it as much as possible so as to ensure ethical integrity in decision-making process. So subjectivity in research is complex, multifaceted, and needs to be carefully considered and managed. And while unavoidable, it is essential for you as researchers and decision makers to be aware of this influence and as much as possible institute strategies to promote objectivity, fairness, and ethical soundness in decision-making and actions, even when it comes to manuscript writing. On that note, I want to say thank you for listening, and I look forward to questions. Over to you, Dr. Lawa.
Thank you very much, Prof, for this enlightening session. We'll go straight to take questions from the audience. So there's a question already on the chat box. Person is thanking you and asking what your biases are against preprints.
Thank you very much. Like preprints, I mean, it's in all top journals now do preprints. Once again, note, and I say it is my subjectivity. It's my own personal concerns, and I'm sure many people in my own generation might have that. My own thinking about preprint is that okay, we'll talk about predator journals. The headache with predator journals is that they are publishing manuscripts that are not properly peer reviewed. The difference, however, please note, between preprint and predator journals is that predator journal publish it. They say this is the final. Preprint, everybody knows it's preprint. We know that it has not been reviewed. So there's a distinction already. However, it's not everybody that knows that distinction. People do quote preprints. People can act on preprints, yet it is not yet peer reviewed. There might be I'm sure there are many preprints that at the end of the day, through peer review, they are actually dropped, they are rejected. So it's this thin line that gives me as an individual a concern. It's this thin line because preprints are not peer reviewed. They're not evidence in itself. They've not been validated by peers. So once it's out there in the public space that becomes accessible and people can quote it and people can actually run with it, then what are we saying? Are we not also, somewhere near the concerns that we have with predator journals? But once again, it's my personal concern. And many times all the time, 100%, I don't allow my papers to go as preprint. My mentees do, they click it. But I don't record it as part of my manuscripts. But once again, I explained my conflict. It is a personal opinion. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much, Ma. Someone wants you to explain how to get MTA, the process of getting MTA.
Excellent question. MTA is the ethics committee actually processes MTA. what happens is that the National Health Research Ethics Committee has obtained the NTA from the, is that one confidentiality? So, well, the National Health Research Ethics Committee houses all MTAs, but the ethics committees, institutional ethics committee process it on their behalf. So there's a form that is filled appropriately, what is it? Appropriately modified by your institution as well as the institution where you're going for. You find out that when you're doing MTA, it is an institution to an institution thing. It's not an individual thing because it's a legal document. So the institution, you must balance it with the institutional ethics committee in your institution being the moderator, the moderator of that balancing. Once they balance it and the ethics committee have signed on your behalf, then they will send it to the National Health Research Ethics Committee for their own documentation. What happens is that if you don't read between the line, when you're going for your PhD or all those things and taking your data, the international bodies, institutions where you go, many times takes away the intellectual property right from you. They take it away from you. What our own MTA does is to institutionalize your rights to those intellectual property that ever comes out from your products. Many people don't read those fine lines. And, those kind of where we sell our future for porridges. We've sold it, guys. Just for the porridge of either the PhD or the porridge of $1,000, $2,000 as a data collector. We don't read those fine lines. But our MTA is strong. It's very strong. It is very unlikely that your other institution, when they see our MTA, that they will take it at first glance because it fights on your behalf for you to own intellectual property. But you can walk between them and get a mid ground wherever both of you are comfortable, but it is moderated by your ethics committee. The ethics committee, once the form is signed and the ethics committee chair signs it on your behalf, then it is transmitted to Abuja for records. It's the ethics committee, not you. But MTA DTA is the ethics committee that does it on behalf of NREC. NREC is working on behalf of the nation. So while the institution signs, the nation guards. That is why the documentation then is sent by your NREC to the nation. Of course, if the NREC is not registered, if your institutional health research ethics committee is not registered with NREC, there becomes a problem and there becomes the gap. Thank you. Over.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ma. I was going through a document recently. I came across research security, and these were some of the things they discussed in it. There are some countries that have Office of Research Security to handle things of intellectual theft and misuse of data from countries by foreigners. I guess is the NREC that handles that for the country.
And the NREC, at least for our country, NREC does it. But once again, I will explain it like this. It's the NREC has the office, the prerogative to do the material transfer agreements. However, there are also that is around your research conduct. There are also other things that also comes with this beyond NREC. And for example, my own institution is the Central Office of Research that handles it. When those kind of institutional legal support happens, there are other things that happen beyond ethics of the research. When I was the director or executive director of the Central Office of Research, there are 3 people that looks at it. The legal. The legal must look at it. What are those fine lines that you cannot read? The second person that looks at it is the Office of Intellectual Property Right. What is there in this thing that might be of interest in international property that we are not looking at? And then the third that looks at it is the entrepreneur, the director of entrepreneurship. What is the entrepreneur potential here that we might be losing by signing this? Once the 3 has looked at it, and if there's any issue, they raise it, they send it. So there's another kind of legal document that signs with the institution. But when it comes to research, also there's that element. Material transfer agreement happens when you're going to move materials. These ones can happen for a bigger or institutional partnership, blah, blah, blah. The Central Office of Research handles it, and it's about security. But whenever you're going to move material, body, saliva, stool, biopsies, data, then the Central Office and the Ethics Committee has to handle it on behalf of the nation. I hope it answers the question. Over.
Yes, ma'am.
But in my own
So there are two
institution,
questions there. One,
let me finish. But my own institution, please note that the Ethics Committee is also under the Central Office of Research. So they are working in consortium, not as parallels. Thank you. Over.
all right, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am. So there are two questions here about inclusion. One is asking you to help differentiate between inclusion and exclusion criteria. Why the other one
Okay.
is specific about.
Let me finish up. Let me
Okay.
take that one. One is inclusion and criteria. Your
Oh,
inclusion criteria is everything that brings the participants into the study. What are those criteria? What you know your study that allows you to fairly and justly bring people to your research. Your exclusion criteria is that for those that I have brought into this research, what do I need to do to exclude some people that would introduce bias to my study? Okay, that is how I distinguish it. So everything that would bring the right participants is inclusion. Everything, including signing consent. Now, these ones that I have included, though, this one I have included. What criteria might I need to look at so that these ones do not introduce bias to my study finding, that exclusion? So in that way, you can say that exclusion is not the opposite of inclusion. There might be times when there's no exclusion criteria. Okay, but when the exclusion criteria, we are looking at these ones that are already included. Who should I remove so that at the end of the day, there's no bias to my study? That is basically the explanation. Thank you. Over.
yes, ma'am. So the third question is asking for you to further clarify your opinion on including 18-year-old and above in a study in which the outcome will benefit children and people below 18. I'm sure you spoke about it earlier. Maybe she
Yeah, I
needs
think it's black
emphasis
and
or
white. If
he or
if a
she
study
needs
is going to
emphasis.
benefit, yeah, I think if the study is going to benefit people below 18, why are you excluding them? It's unjust exclusion. If the study is about a population. The study is about a gap in a population. If the people that are going to benefit it is below 18 years, then you include them and do what is right. What is right is that for people below 18, you would have to assent or and consent. So this is it. If the study needs to involve people in Nigeria, based on Nigeria's age record, other spaces, for example, in the US, the cutoff is 8 years. In Nigeria, it is 12 years. Anybody between 12 and 17, you must collect assent and parental consent. Assent from the individual and parental consent. Once they are below 12, you collect consent from their parents. Okay. And when they're between 12 and 17, the assent of the child supersedes the parental consent, which means if the child says, I'm not participating, whether the parent says he must participate by force or not, it cannot happen. So that is this. So people don't want to go through that wahala, then they start excluding them. Please note that you are studying a population and the interpretation of your results it must be generalizable. So if you now do a study on 18 years because of consent purposes, how is it going to be generalized to children that are below 18 that has a whole world of characteristics of their own, including the fact that they're under their parents? How do you interpret that? So you must include appropriately participants that represent the people for whom the research outcome will be generalized to. Thank you. Over. We have just 2 minutes.
Yes, someone shared his experience about preprints, which his paper was rejected because they already have a preprint in existence. He thanked you for your comment. So last question here. How do
Yeah,
the ethics
let me
committee.
just add to that. Yes, thank you very much. I didn't want to say that, but that's one of the reasons also why I don't do it. But for many journals now, they were asked you to declare if you have a preprint. Okay, so once you declare that you have a preprint, you must declare that then they would be able to pick and roll out from that similarity. Because once they reject it from one way, you have to go somewhere. And then there's a preprint. You just pick up with plagiarism and unnecessary complications. Thank you very much for raising that also. Over to you, producer.
Okay, so the last one here is how do the ethics committee arrest the predatory journals out there so that as a researcher we are moving to perfection?
Excellent
Um,
question. Unfortunately, ethics committee cannot do that because ethics committee are supposed to review your proposal before you go to the field. Journals are used after you have done your work and you want to publish. There are two different worlds. Ethics committee cannot. What the institution can do is train and continue to include it as its own policy that they do not entertain and include predator journals. For example, in my own university, you must, if you publish a manuscript, the library lists acceptable journals. The library lists acceptable journals. Of course, on that acceptable journals, they don't include predator journals. If you ever publish in a journal that is not listed, or you publish in a book in a publishing house that has not been listed by the university, you have to take it to the library for it to be accredited and included in the list. Otherwise, when it gets to A and PC, they will drop it. Okay, that is my own university's way of instituting. But otherwise, please know that ethics committee only review protocols before it is published, before you go to the field. Predator journals happen after you have finished your work, you've written your manuscript, and then you go visit it. The ethics committee cannot address the issue of predator journals, but the university policies can address that. Thank you very much. Over to you. We can't hear you, Kudus.
Thank you. Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I was just saying that marks the end of today's session. We're just on top of the hour. Thanks for sharing your Saturday morning with us. But before we end the session, I just shared on the chat box the link to the session, the conference we are planning to hold by 20th to 22nd of this month. It promises to be a very impactful one in which key speakers across the globe will be coming to join us to speak at the conference, and there will be important papers to be presented. Do ensure to register. The link is already in the chat box. You can contact me directly if you need further information. Thank you.
And yes, and please invite your
Do have a
supervisors.
lovely week.
Please invite your supervisors and mentees and please promote the conference. Thank you. Have a lovely weekend too. Bye.